You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast presented here by Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a Rockies affiliate of Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Skyler Timmons, and I'm joined today by our very own resident coach here in Colorado and pitching enthusiast, Kenneth Weber.
I prefer the term instructor, but mostly I'm not Evan, but I'm here filling the big shoes of Evan Lang today. So yeah, it's fun though, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Evan went on vacation. He's in Texas. He's been at all three Texas Rangers versus Rockies games. Planned his whole trip around that. Fortunately, it hasn't panned out very well for him. Rockies-wise, those games have not been very good. But always happy to have Kenneth hop on with us. He's kind of our minor league, also just kind of head honcho covering the minor leagues with the Pebble Report podcast. Heard him and Evan earlier this month. You'll probably hear back from him again early June with the Pebble Report podcast and all of his articles over at Purple Rose. So fun times.
Yeah, man. I mean, the minor league, it's been that way for Rockies fans, I think, for a couple of years, where it's like, well, I'm going to pay more attention to the promise of the guys on the farm. But, hey, when they start seeing Tovars and Doyles doing their thing in the majors, it's good to have an idea of kind of what kind of ball players they are before they actually reach Coors. So that's the whole point.
Yeah, so it's always good. I'm just getting more into the minor league stuff this year. I usually don't, but trying to spend more time getting to know those guys because we all know the big league club isn't as fun at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, do you remember April? Things are way better now.
Yeah, it could be worse. It could have been April.
Yeah.
But we're happy to be back here. We took the week off last week for Mother's Day and just busy schedules, but we're back in action. Today I'm taking a break from playing the new Legend of Zelda to come and talk Rockies baseball, and then I'll go right back to playing that because
begrudgingly talking Rockies baseball.
Yeah, it's the only thing that could pull me away from building dumb things and fighting monsters. Good stuff.
Story of my life. Dumb things and fighting monsters.
That's what life's all about. All right, well, let's get into it, Kenneth. I guess first I wanted to ask, as people don't know, we're Purple Row adjacent. A lot of our staff members, Kenneth included, are able to go to Rockies games sometimes and kind of mingle with the players and cover the games. And since I have you here, Kenneth, I just wanted to ask, what's kind of been the general vibe? I know you were there recently at the Rockies games. What's kind of the vibe you've gotten from the team here in May as opposed to what we saw in April?
Yeah, I wasn't around much in April because it's finishing up the high school season, but it's been jovial. I would say is the term for the clubhouse in May. It's definitely a lot looser, and I think that's very well represented with Buddy Black. There's those times where he gets a little bit more tense, a little bit upright, and not necessarily defensive. But there's only so many times where you can be asked about it's bad, why is it bad, and come up with new and interesting answers for it. So I think it's loosened up. Maybe it's just you weathered the worst of it, so to speak, for what this season is going to be, and now they can just kind of get back to playing. And I think there's a little bit, not so much of guys speaking up, young guys in particular, but I think that there's a little bit more energy just from some of the performances that you've seen out of Tovar and Doyle. So I think that's kind of reverberated around the clubhouse and, given them some new life over the course of the month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you can definitely tell that where they're just playing better baseball. There's been better defense and everything. And so having guys kind of performing a little better, in the lineup, they're incredible hitting with runners in scoring position for the most part until they leave the bases loaded, nobody out, and they don't score. But I would kind of agree with that sentiment. Just from what I can tell, watching and listening to games, that they do seem a little looser after an abysmal first month of the season.
And it's an intangible thing, so to speak, but Randall Grichuk coming back I think is an important part of that process because he does seem to kind of have a clubhouse leadership to him, so to speak, or at the very least, one of the more respected veterans in the room. So I think once he got back into the swing of things, maybe it just felt like some pieces of the puzzle, started getting put into place, and everybody was able to feel more normal, I guess, with the season. So that was a big part of it.
Yeah, and like Jerickson Profar has now had a full almost 2 months now with the team. He's kind of integrated himself. He's got that huge on base streak going still, and so you can kind of see guys getting comfortable. They're meshing a little better.
Yeah. And another thing is there's still a tremendous amount of injuries that has gone on, especially with the pitching staff. So, it's a breath of fresh air after Marquez walked back into the room. Seeing him with the TJ cast going, and every day, there's the questions about Ryan Feltner, and he should be, I think, coming back to the clubhouse this week. So, that's another thing that's a shot in the arm, so to speak, is seeing these guys who might have gone down for the year are still, around the clubhouse, and it's always just uplifting when those guys come back.
Yeah, that's like what we saw with Scott Oberg. Even though he wasn't playing, he was still integrated with the team in the clubhouse. And I think more than ever, that's what's going to be really important this year because, like you said, there's a ton of guys on the injured list, specifically pitching-wise, which is kind of our next talking point here. The Rockies is trying to stitch together a pitching staff some way, shape, or form as they try to navigate the season because Antonio Senzatela, who came back from the ACL, had one good start, and then his next start only lasted a couple of innings, and what was it, a UCL sprain is what it was diagnosed as in his pitching elbow, which Kenneth has the expertise here on the the old UCL and everything. So he's got his scar there showing on for your video viewers.
Yeah, they need to know.
It's probably a scary situation still. Obviously, Senzatela's a little worried about it. He's probably going to miss a couple of months at least. What do you see that timetable and that significance of Senzatela's injury?
I think this is the hard part because Lucas Gilbreth, I think, was in a very similar situation, minus, coming back from the torn ACL that Senzatela went through. But Lucas Gilbreth at the end of last year was kind of going through the same process, the same spiel where, okay, there's an injury to the ulnar collateral ligament. This is not a full-blown tear. We know that we don't have to go in there right now and do Tommy John, but it's the question of how much can we let this recuperate and kind of help it regenerate and build up strength to avoid the full tear happening, so to speak. I'm pessimistic in that because those aren't always the best outcomes. There's a lot of inevitability that when there's damage to that ligament, it's gonna, kind of find its way through. Life will find a way to tear your elbow. But so right now they did a PRP, or at least they were on the precipice of having a platelet-rich pallet injection into the elbow last week. There was kind of some back and forth as to whether or not he had already done it, but it was on the table. So that's the next step is, okay, let's kind of juice up the joint, so to speak, try to get the blood flow going in that area. So that way we can get some healing going on and then start slowly rehabbing. I think this shows that the timetable is he's probably another month. I would say, 3 to 4 weeks, because there has to be buildup and there can't be the slightest setback because any sort of setbacks that happen along the way, one, you have to either start all over, and that's kind of best case scenario, or two, this ends up meaning that there's the tear is bigger than expected or tore more, whatever the case may be, and now it's under the knife talk. So I think they have to be treating it very conservatively and being very ginger about the whole thing because, hey, if he goes down, that's a year. That's another year lost for Senzatela or for Senza. So, it's adding to the problems. It's just really adding to the problems in a hard way. And we just went through this with Marquez, where there were a lot of red flags hanging all over the place with the triceps and the forearm, and then ultimately that led to, the tear being evident. So now we're at that point again with Senzatela, is the hard truth of it.
And for an organization that has bet so hard on these guys being healthy, we need them in the rotation. These are our guys, and making very little effort to boost that starting pitching depth in the past. Like if we lose Senzatela here soon, and if it inevitably becomes Tommy John surgery, you're down 2 starters already for the 2024 season.
Mhm.
And who knows what they're going to do in the offseason to try and address that. And so they're just kind of scrambling and seeing what can they get out of guys they have right now. And whether it's the trades, rookies bringing up like Carl Kaufman, or they hitting the waiver wire and bringing in veterans like Chase Anderson, who was kind of the go-to pivot after Senzatela goes down. They bring in Chase Anderson pretty quickly. And as recording, he's made 1 start. And not too shabby for Chase Anderson, 35-year-old. I guess he's 36 now, maybe. Coming over from the Tampa Bay Rays, made a couple of starts with them, or pitched 5 innings, did pretty well in his 2 games with them. But he looked pretty good in that first outing for Chase Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, 1 hit over 5 shutout innings. No matter how you slice it, you'll take that every single time.
At Coors Field.
It was weird because Monday, I think there was 12 runs scored by the end of the 4th inning. And then on Tuesday, there's 2 hits and no runs on the board by the end of the 4th inning. So it was definitely a contrast to the night before. I think he offers a bit of a different look, which is a nice part, whether that's intentional or not, for picking up Chase Anderson. I think it all boils down to this is a professional starting pitcher that we know can give us some quality innings. It might not always be the prettiest, and it might not be he wins us a lot of ball games, but he can give us a chance. And so let's write it. And when it's from a pitching-rich organization like Tampa, he's not being cut because he's Jose Arena. He's not, terribly ineffective. It's just there's an arsenal of better options probably that comes into an organization like that. It's decent depth, and I think it's more of a fastball profile and a cutter profile where we have a lot more guys in the rotation that work harder breaking balls or soft tossing lefties. So I think it's a nice different look. Do I think that Chase Anderson is going to have the type of year that makes him a viable piece or somebody to expect will be in the rotation moving forward? I'm nowhere close to that yet. But when you need to patch a hole, that's, there's worse options that could be run out there. So I think it's a fine pickup, and it showed well in the first start at the very least.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they're going to have to do moving forward throughout this season, is just looking for, not necessarily your next ace, but a guy who can go out there and just give you 5 quality innings, keep you in the ball game, and give your offense a chance to win it, because that's really all you can ask of your starting rotation this year, especially in Colorado, is we just need you to go out there and just don't give up a ton of runs, which Connor Siebold is doing today. While we're recording. Well. But that's what all you can ask for is the pitching staff as they try to stitch it together. We just need guys that can be effective for 4 innings, and then we can hand it off to our bullpen, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But it's just as this injuries stack up. Ryan Feltner takes a line drive to head, fractures his skull, and gets a concussion. Noah Davis, we're still waiting on him to come back. He was having elbow troubles. And so there's a lot of worries there. And so if you can bring in Chase Anderson to just kind of stop the bleeding just a little bit, that's really nice. That's good to see. And could be a lot worse, like you're saying. Yeah, but especially the guy coming from Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and so one, you kind of trust the factory where he is coming from. The good news on Noah Davis last week, that was one of the questions I talked to Buddy about. He was throwing a bullpen. I believe that was his second pen in the past 2 weeks. So he's building up. It's getting a little bit more in the clear than like we are with the Senzatela right now. With the Senzatela right now, it's okay, let's play and catch. How does it feel? Very, very limited amount of action that Senza's elbow is being put through right now. Davis is building up. I think it's feeling like he's kind of getting pretty close to that minor league rehab assignment territory. So that's a good thing. He quickly has become somebody that they're going to need to count on to be in the rotation with everything that's going on. And just, in general thought, the Rockies have been kind of lucky when it comes to starting pitching health over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So there's some bad juju that's coming this year. And if you look at most organizations throughout baseball and you say, okay, look at your starting rotation and now remove 2 of the top 3, how are you going to do? That's a really tough ask for a lot of teams. And so it's okay to kind of feel sorry for the Rockies a little bit in this situation. But that said, you still have what, 80 games to go, 75 games to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's not you're not in the clear yet. And no, whatever. There's quite a bit more left on the schedule. And hey, they're just going to have to weather it, and they're going to have to, start getting a longer leash for a Noah Davis when he comes back in. And Carl Kaufman is probably going to be needed in the rotation. And whether you need some seasoning in AAA or not, you got to get out there.
Yeah, and it kind of brings up the next point where a couple of those rookie debuts this week. We can start with, since we're talking starting pitching, Carl Kaufman made a long-awaited debut, finally made his debut. Was drafted in 2019, rose up, and finally made his start in Texas last Friday. And he was good through his first couple of innings, and then probably about that fourth or fifth inning, things kind of started to go downhill a little bit. But Carl Kaufman, this guy that you've been covering there and following with in the minor leagues, it's good to see him and see that potential. But like you're saying, there's still some growth that needs to happen with Carl Kaufman.
Definitely. And I mean, a lot of it comes down to the command. And one thing with Kaufman is he's not just able to beat guys with his stuff. And so there's a disadvantage of it when you can't pump 97. You can miss with 97 over the middle of the plate and get away with it. You can't do that with 92. And that's kind of the boat that Carl Kaufman is in. So it's never been the most exciting profile, so to speak. It's not that high octane guy, but that doesn't mean he can't be an effective pitcher. And I think he showed that the first time through the order in that start in Texas. And then, Mario and I were talking about it a little bit on the Slack channel too. He really needs to be able to work both sides of the plate, especially against lefties. Otherwise, that's going to let some guys cheat on him. And so it showed some of the limitations, so to speak, that Kaufman has, and how it might get exposed a little bit at the major league level the second time through. Texas swings it, so it wasn't the easiest assignment for him. And I thought overall he showed pretty well. But for him to be a successful contributor in the rotation on a consistent basis, it also showed some of the things that need to come around. He's clicked a little bit more in May. One of the big things with Kaufman was once he got promoted to AAA Albuquerque last year, the walks really spiked. Again, hard assignment, just the Pacific Coast League in general. So he, getting yourself into trouble and then being in a very unfavorable environment leads to inflated ERAs. But the more that he can limit the self-inflicted damage, the better off he is. And I think he showed that pretty well in his major league debut and so far through May. If he can throw strikes, at least, that's kind of the minimum requirement to be in the Rockies rotation. And he's at least showing that so far in May.
Yeah, throwing strikes, but then it really matters where you're throwing those strikes.
Yeah.
So you're saying that kind of seems to be the overall problem that we're seeing with the Rockies, just starting pitching problems, aside from injuries. It's just pitch execution, location, their command. When you're missing middle all over the plate to everybody, that's where we're seeing a lot of these lopsided games immediately, where our starters are lasting 3 innings at the most. But then we can get starts where Kyle Freeland or Austin Gomber go out there and throw out 6-7 innings of high quality baseball. So it's find that balance, and we're going to need guys like Kaufman. This is kind of out of desperation. These guys are going to have that opportunity. When you're losing guys out of your rotation, you need these guys to make the most of their opportunity. And if they're not panning out, or if it doesn't work, can kind of be that process with the Rockies of, okay, we got to reassess. These guys just probably aren't in the picture. Maybe we can trade them and get something else to work with or whatever. But there's that silver lining with injuries, is you can kind of audition guys now instead of waiting until you're putting all your eggs in that basket.
Yeah, and I guess the disappointing part, and to bring it full circle, is there's a very finite amount of guys that are eligible for the audition is the tough part. And this is where the frustration for Rockies fans can come in, is there wasn't enough added in the off season to prepare for something like this. Now, can you ever be fully prepared? Well, I mean, you can maybe have the endless pockets of the Dodgers, and then yes, depth for days, but most teams aren't. But it's very fair to say that they're were certainly more available on the market that the Rockies could have added to create some reinforcements because, the upper levels of the minors, especially on the pitching side, has just not been productive over the past couple of seasons. Double A is showing a little bit more signs of life this year, but that's also coming with, one step forward, two steps back, so to speak. You get Chris McMahon into the rotation, and he's out there and he's throwing and he's looking well. Well, Joe Rock made one start and the shoulder went down, and Nick Bush still hasn't thrown this year. So it's like the Rockies have seen the writing on the wall for this for a while. And now a lot of the eggs really just go into Carl Kaufman and a Ryan Feltner and a Noah Davis are the depth. And again, this comes back to the Peter Lambert and Ryan Rollison conversation. There's a lot of smoke being put into the fire that Ryan Rollison is actually throwing again, but would it surprise anybody if he immediately gets vaulted into the next guy up after not pitching for 3 years?
Yeah.
That, on one hand, that speaks to, okay, you still have faith. You still are a big Ryan Rollison fan as an organization as a whole. Good. But also that means there is such little in the way from him being finally back pitching again to him being the front of the line for the next guy up. That just speaks to the depth that they didn't really build up in the offseason. So now we're seeing it exposed.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big question heading into the next offseason, looking way ahead in our crystal balls, is starting pitching is a premium market, and the Rockies are going to have to learn to play in that market. Because I still firmly they probably just priced themselves out of the starting pitching market last offseason once guys were going for 10, 11, $12 million contracts for 1 year, and they don't want to pay that for 1 year of a starting pitcher. And so they might have to readjust how the market's going and learn to play in that because we're seeing the effects now.
I mean, there's a reason why, maybe a number 3 kind of guy is getting paid 12 mil, or maybe he's more of a number 4, what have you, but it's not ace caliber numbers. The price is inflated, sure, but that also goes to show when you sign a Jose Arena to a 2x5 basically or something, you kind of got what you paid for with that one, didn't you? So maybe you pony up instead. And okay, it might not be the most appetizing price tag for a guy, but you need somebody to give you some quality innings. And if the younger guys aren't going to be able to do it, or you want to give some insurance for those younger guys to battle it out for just one spot instead of maybe 3 spots in the rotation, then you go and you pay for a quality major league arm for a year. You bring in a Michael Lorenzen or whatever it may be. So I believe I agree completely that they're gun shy over it, and I think that that's just more of a stigma for the Rockies historically speaking. You got to get over it because you got to improve the pitching area, and you can't just live or die with two or three guys.
Yeah, and if they're so worried about it of pitchers not wanting to come, pour as much money as you can to figure out how to pitch at Coors Field. Like there's some pretty easy solutions. So we'll keep talking about it and crying from the rooftops about it.
We'll be pounding on the table for the 31st consecutive year in 2024.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll figure it out eventually. But we'll go ahead and take a quick break here for our audio listeners. Video people will keep going on. But we'll be right back after these quick messages. All righty, Kenneth, let's keep this rolling on. Thanks for coming back with us here on Rocky Mountain Rooftop here with Affected by Altitude. And we talk about the starting pitching and everything. And there's the bullpen, I think, is one that's getting more recognition this season after years of it being awful. One of the worst in all of baseball for the past couple of seasons. I think since 2020, we've been one of the worst bullpens in baseball. And they made a concerted effort in the offseason and have kind of stitched together a pretty nice bullpen that has done a lot of work, carried a lot of the weight this season for the Rockies. And that one's continually shuffling in. They're having to stick in some parts in and out. But overall, the bullpen has been phenomenal. You've got guys like Brent Suter. You've got Jake Bird and Justin Lawrence doing well. Pierce Johnson, he can be shaky at times, but still fairly solid. They've used Brad Hand sparingly, but he's been effective here and there. And then Daniel Bard, he's still not quite where we want him to be, but he's there and he's performing. And Then we have some other names thrown in there. Nick Mears has been in there. He's on the injured list. Fernando Abad was on for a couple of games, and we said, no, thank you. And he's off the roster.
He was
Matt Carasidi is back on the roster, first time since 2016. Full circle for that guy. And then Riley Pint made his long-awaited debut. And we'll talk about all these guys. But bullpen, where are you at with the bullpen there, Kenneth?
I mean, you got to be happy with it, right? This is really, really dependent on three guys. Bird, Suter, and Lawrence, I feel like have done a ton of the heavy lifting for the group as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't updated it, but heading into the Texas series of relievers with the most appearances, but to not make a start, Jake Bird has the most with, I believe it was 21 appearances. Suter was second with 19, and Lawrence was somewhere in the ballpark of 6 with about 16 or 17. So they're leaning so heavily on the bullpen, and they've been very, very good. It definitely comes down to Bird kind of being the new age fireman for the Rockies. Like I don't know if there's a defined role for Jake Bird other than whenever there's leverage, go Birdman. That seems to be the whole thought process. But Suter has been much the same, and then it's good to see Lawrence really evolve into a true setup man. I think he's really taken that step and embraced it this year. So you got to be happy with it. I agree that the Brad Hand has been well utilized. You could say that they've had a light touch with Hand, which is perfect. But he has been good in the spots that he's been asked of him. And I think that they're also trying to create the most stable environments for Daniel Bard to get him on track, which, I think that's a healthy philosophy. And then Johnson, it might not always be the prettiest and cleanest innings. He's kind of going Craig Kimbrell on it, where it's getting it done, but it doesn't always look the best. So it's been working. So they have a good thing going. My whole thought process on it, though, right now is this is the embodiment. This is the definition of bullpen burnout on the horizon. Because right now, the Rockies' starting rotation has the second fewest innings pitched in baseball at 214 and a third, heading into today, Sunday, while sitting eighth in innings pitched at 70.1 out of the bullpen. They have the top bullpen WAR. They have the second best earned run average, but a lot of that is coming down to a bunch of heavy appearances from Lawrence, Suter, and Bird. And so if you're going to have to keep using them as we get into June and as we get into July, bullpen burnout, and then you kind of start showing your true colors a little bit. Feels like that's on the horizon.
Yeah, we've seen that a couple of times where some shaky appearances from Jake Bird or Justin Lawrence, or not so much Suter. He's been pretty consistent throughout, but Jake Bird and Justin Lawrence, it seems like every time there's that big situation, here comes Jake Bird, here comes Justin Lawrence, and on a night-to-night basis. And yeah, I'm sure those guys are pumped up and they're raring and ready to go whenever. But getting exposed as often as they do, you can start to see where batters start to lay off a little more. The more they see those frisbees from Justin Lawrence, the more they're going to learn to lay off of them. And so hopefully that burnout doesn't come. But I kind of agree with that, where it feels like it's coming at some point. Just around the bend, you're going to have a bullpen that's just getting beat up time and time again, or maybe injuries start to show up. There's always those things to worry about. But man, you just hope that they can keep it up as best they can. But part of that to help prevent that is the starting pitching has got to get better and pitch deeper into games. But on this opposite end, these guys can't take it away from them, though. They've been spectacular, and they've kind of been that calming influence. For the most part, a lot of those main guys, calming influence where you don't have to worry as much. Once Bird or Lawrence come in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning, the back half of the game, you don't worry as much.
And when you're talking about some of the cracks being exposed, so to speak, when the heavy usage for a Lawrence or a Bird happens, it could just be diminished stuff. I mean, based off the workload, and I misspoke earlier on this. It wasn't total relief appearance. It's innings pitched, where Jake Bird is at the top, Suter is sitting second, and Lawrence at this point I think is fifth now, of just pure relievers. So it's multiple innings, it's multiple sets, frames that they're having to go, and I think Jake Bird is the personification of that. You keep
Mhm.
on writing it, and maybe it's the rubber elbow, sure, but maybe there's a hard wall that gets hit along the way. So you got to be pleased, and I think that this is probably the biggest factor into the team being as good as they've been in May. Is you're getting performances, in different spots of the lineup. You're having some consistency out of Diaz, which is creating some runs, and then when you're getting into the later stages of a game, the bullpen is doing a remarkable job in locking it down. So hey, it's a good recipe to get wins, but it's hard for that to be sustainable throughout a season. That's kind of where I'm at with them right now. So happy for him. I think this is showing a lot for Jake Bird. I think we're seeing the growth of Justin Lawrence, and Suter has just been such a welcome addition and a breath of fresh air, that it's helping not put us, in Daniel Bard and Brad Hand having to be the guys who are managing this workload, because that would probably dissolve quicker. But again, you need that rotation to start getting through into the third time in the order more consistently. Because right now, I mean, we have the most starts in baseball under 80 pitches, and it's by a pretty wide margin. So it's showing that they're having pretty quick hooks, and you're getting like a Peter Lambert in there. It's here or there, but when your long reliever is throwing 3 times a week, that's too much long relief. And that's kind of
Yeah.
the point the Rockies have been in.
Well, yeah, and then that's where you see a lot of these moves and shuffling in the bullpen of bringing in relievers because they need a fresh arm.
Hmm.
Because Jake Bird just has thrown 4 innings across the next 2 days. We need an extra bullpen arm because we don't expect our starter to go more than 3 or 4 innings today. And
Yeah.
so that's where we've seen guys like Fernando Abad come up. 37-year-old been having a decent year down in AAA Albuquerque.
Hmm.
Who knows what happens with him because he's been DFA'd. So if he goes back to Albuquerque, maybe he does. But that's why you see guys like him come back or come up. Matt Carrot City's now up with the team, and then Riley Pint got a brief, tiny little cameo with the Rockies. Just kind of give them an arm for a day and everything. But it's that same thing we talk about with starting pitching, where the bullpen depth's also getting tested with them having to pitch so often. We need fresh arms. Who down in Albuquerque is ready to come up and eat a couple innings on the day, perhaps. So it's a tough balance that they've got to figure out with depth, which is what we've always been talking about with pitching wise.
Well, not only that, but you're also losing some of your candidates to take more relief innings to the rotation. Somebody like Connor Siebold is now going in and having to be, I guess, the 4 in the staff. Austin Gomber, it feels like such a distant memory, but heading into the season, was Austin Gomber a slam dunk for the rotation after the way he was utilized last year? And so it's again just the injuries have a trickle effect throughout the rest of the staff. And now you're leaning on a Seabold. I think Dinelson Lamet is an interesting conversation right now, because he could conceivably come back into either one of those roles with the way that they're handling his rehab and given his previous history as a starter in San Diego. So he was good for him last year out of the pen. There's a serious lacking in the rotation, and he wasn't very good for them in the pen to start this season. So which way is it going to go? But that's somebody else that's coming in. I feel like the next guy on the docket, when it's coming just a pure relief role, and it's going to be based on health, obviously. Hollowell just got activated, so we're going to see on Hollowell. But also Blair Calvo is another name to keep an eye on. I think that there are a couple of bullpen reinforcements that could be on the way for the staff as a whole, but you're going to need a lot of them if you keep on getting the hook in the 4th inning at 3 out of every 4 games, and that's kind of the state the Rockies have been in.
Yeah, because we've got Tyler Kinley, who's going to be back, maybe by the All-Star break. So he'll
He's
be
throwing
coming
a
back
lot.
soon. And then you've got Nick Mears, will be coming off the injured list sometime soon. He can pump the gas, even if he's a little wild. So there are those reinforcements that can come. It's just that same same issue that we have with the starting rotation of, well, no one's a real slam dunk of, okay, we know when this guy comes up, he's going to be lights out. You're just going to roll the dice and say, with a hope and a prayer, man, I hope this guy doesn't, I hope this guy pans out.
Yeah, and Buddy, as a former pitcher, is very particular about his trust with those situations. I think Jake Bird, it's very clear that he crossed that line into Black's good favors this year. And now look at him, he's always out there. They're going to have to start small because that's just the way Black handles it. And so they're going to have limited opportunities. I think that just the situation, if there's some burnout in the bullpen or the starting pitching continues to lack the ability to go deep into games, may force Black's hand, but he's going to try to, blanket them as much as possible and shelter them from too many opportunities to avoid a lot of damage happening to him, because that's the way he operates.
Yeah. And kind of a textbook thing of that, and this kind of transition to our last thing we'll talk about in this segment, was the long-awaited debut of Riley Pint. So, incredible story. You recently wrote an article about his journey, and it's kind of been the talk of the town. When he debuted in that last game at home at Cruiseville before they headed down on the road trip, and wasn't a great debut. That's okay. Yeah. After the journey he's been on, for him to get on a mound is pretty incredible. And all of us Purple Row and people in Rockies fandom have been rooting for the kid to finally make it. After being drafted in 2016, our number one pick that year for the Rockies, and then struggled, injuries, everything, retired during the 2021 season, then re-signed, came back with the Rockies for 2022, and kind of turned into a relief pitcher, and then just quickly rose back up into AAA and was added to the 40-man, and then Rockies added him to the roster finally to get a debut. But it wasn't a great debut, no, like you said, but you could kind of see that blanket protecting of Riley Pint. Once he walked a couple of guys, they already had somebody warming up right away, early in that inning, as just in case. But I think at the end of the day, nobody really cared how he did anything. It was just the fact that he was on the mound.
Yeah, I think that was the plan all along. I think it was Monday when I brought it up. How many runs? What was the run differential that was safe? What was the margin that was needed to get Riley Pint into a ball game? And I think also they knew the move was coming, so they had to make sure they got him an opportunity before they sent him back down. Just because, as you mentioned, I mean, it's such a scroll of a journey. That for him to finally get to the mound on Coors Field is just such an accomplishment for him and the organization. I think is the way that it's been built up, that it needed to happen while he was up. And again, the results were irrelevant. It was, you need to see it, because when we talk about Riley Pint, the more I thought about it heading into that article, has any Rockies player had higher expectations put on them? Is there another guy that has, before they've even achieved anything in their career, so to speak, been labeled as the guy as much as Riley Pint was? It's one of those interesting things where he's just, there was a lot put onto teenage kids in the industry of baseball, and it doesn't always work out. And for Pint to actually make it into the big leagues is huge on its own right. And there's still a legitimate bona fide big league arm there, and he could evolve into a dominant reliever. It's not a finished product by any means. I think the debut showed us that, but it's a viable option, and I think it's one that the Rockies were very determined to see pitch for them at the very least this season. So hey, we'll see if more comes from it. But it finally, the nice part is it kind of finally feels like this story is actually starting now. It doesn't feel like this was, okay, it's he made it, now you can cast him off into the sunset. It's like, okay, he got it out of the way. He can be here. So we'll see. We mentioned earlier the other types of relievers that are there, and I don't think he's higher on the totem pole than some of those other guys, to be honest. I think some of the guys being shut down with injuries at that time created the opportunity for Pint. So hey, the whole point of this conversation has been there's going to be more arms needed because we still got a ways to go, and he's certainly in that conversation. So that's the good news.
Yeah, and I'd like to see what he can do when it's not the first game jitters, the adrenaline and everything that happens when you're after all of that to then expect him to pitch lights out. It would have been nice.
Sure.
I just watched The Rookie last night with
Royce
Dennis
Clayton
Quaid.
shut down.
So we would have loved Riley Pint to come out there and strike out Royce Clayton, former Rocky, in that movie. But
Royce Clayton to get his first at bat in 14 years.
Yeah, I know. What an incredible story what the Reds are doing with Royce Clayton. But so that would have been nice. We would have loved the storybook. Oh, after this long journey, he comes in and he strikes out the side and everything. No, that's not how it happens. Ends up walking the bases loaded, that type of thing. But that journey for him, and I'd love to see what he can do now. He's had that moment. He's kind of been able to soak that in. And now when he goes back to Albuquerque, he does his thing. And then be ready with the next time he come up, he can be all business. He's like, okay, I've been in the big leagues now. No, I've walked over that. I've gotten across that bridge. Now I can just focus on that and not worry about the emotions and everything. And so it's probably good that they had as big a lead as they did at the time, the run differential there. But that journey, because we're going to need him. He's a guy that's proven, okay, I can be a relief pitcher and I can be effective. And that's who we need now. And hopefully other pitchers that don't have to go through the same journey, that hard journey that he did. But it's cool to see him come out on the other side of it. And then maybe it can kind of lead him to be a leader among the other young guys that he plays with of, man, I went through this and this is what I learned and this is how I got over and got better at it or got over things and improved to where he's at now, where he can now officially say, I'm a big league pitcher. And that's always a nice story to have.
Yeah, and one thing with a lot of players is it's the harder part is to stay in the majors than to actually reach the majors.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that the learning is done, and having the same clubhouse and, sharing the same locker room with somebody like Daniel Bard, I think could help him get closer to the point that you were mentioning of kind of being a bullpen leader. And I think that's a long-term, perspective. That's a long-term idea, because first he has to learn how to stick in the majors. That's going to be the big thing. But when we talk about, long journeys and well-documented struggles, well, Daniel Bard was the guy. He was the next great closer in baseball, and there was absolutely no debate over it. And then he went from that peak, basically getting Jonathan Papelbon out of town because there's somebody we like better, probably as a person too. And then we're gonna, but then that just the wheels completely fell off, and so he had such a long road to get back to the major leagues, and has found a way to make it work. And so that's one of those things where you hope that it is able to translate from that success story to a new one. And I think that's the path that the Rockies have really tried to draw out for Pine as best they could. And then, hey, if it does, he moves on to the next generation of being able to be that guy to explain it to him. So, yeah, it's a wonderful thought. But I think just how much he can stick into the bullpen on a day-to-day basis over the course of this season is going to be the interesting tell to see how much of a reality that situation could be.
Yeah. Because like we said, if you can throw strikes, you're in a good spot. And
he still throws 99 with a mean slider. Like, we talked about Carl Kaufman, and Carl Kaufman doesn't have the luxury of getting away with mistakes over the middle of the plate. Riley Pint does. Riley Pint absolutely does. And so it's just, how often can he actually control the strike zone, not so much command within the strike zone. That's the thing with Pint that has to develop.
Yeah. We can say that about a ton of guys.
Yeah, well,
that's baseball.
We can't say 99 with a mean slider about a ton of guys, though.
I wish.
So, yeah.
Especially with the Rockies with their 7 total pitches of 98 and higher.
That was hilarious.
Goodness. Yeah, we do not throw gas.
Small number on the board.
And the top team's like 300 and something.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, you have
Crazy
an
stuff.
arm barn of Aroldis Chapman's at the top of the list, and then you have one Justin Lawrence outing on the bottom, and that accounts for all of the Rockies pitches over 98 miles an hour this season.
That means you got a staff full of Jamie Moyer. Not that quite slow, but
No, not quite that bad, but yeah, it was an insane, uh, stretch from the top of the list, which was it Tampa? I think it was. Tampa's
something
like
like that.
341 pitches over 98 this year, and the Rockies 7.
7.
Wah,
And how many do I need to pass? Oh, goodness. Did Fernando Abad throw a single of his EFIS pitches at all?
I don't know. I had
'Cause-
regionals this weekend, so to be honest, I haven't been able to track the Rangers series as well as I would.
I figure if he had thrown, we would have seen like Pitching Ninja or somebody post it.
I would imagine.
He's thrown a couple of those in Albuquerque. It's like 50 something miles an hour. Just whoop.
The Grinky.
Good times. Alrighty. Well, that's kind of our spiel on the bullpen. We'll take one last break here, and then we'll come back. We're going to talk about a couple of the rookies here on the Rockies having some interesting experiences so far. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after these messages. Alrighty. Welcome back here for our final segment here on Affected by Altitude. Again, Skyler here, along with Kenneth, as Evan is in Texas, not having fun in at the Ranger Stadium. Was it Globe Life Field? I don't know what they're called anymore.
The Tough Shed.
Yeah, the giant shed barn.
He's working on his tan with a big frown on his face.
But we're going to close things out here with a couple of the rookies, and they've been kind of a key part in some of the turnaround for the Rockies this month, as they're still finding their way, but they're having their moments of greatness that we've seen, and that's in Ezequiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle. And I think first and foremost, we want to talk about Brenton Doyle, because ever since he got called up, and then he's kind of become a regular member of the outfield kind of rotation out there with Randall Grichuk and Jerks and Profar. Those three are kind of mixing around who's getting playing time. And defensively, Brenton Doyle is there. He's kind of been that true center fielder the Rockies haven't had in a long time, since maybe like Drew Stubbs, maybe. And even then is stubby.
Yeah, you got away with it a little bit with the end of Charlie Blackmon's peak, so to speak, but it was never quite that athlete out in center field. The power speed combo. I agree that the story of Drew Stubbs' career was the potential for him to be that guy, but you only saw it in very limited qualities. So, Preston Wilson, you want to go with that?
Yeah, it's
go
like
that far back.
Like Willie Tavares probably was like the legit center fielder they had.
The speed part of it, at least.
Yeah, the speed part of it. And then, Dexter Fowler.
When you had Cargo out there, that was honestly that's the embodiment. That's the prototype that you want. The problem is you need Carlos Gonzalez's bat more than you need Carlos Gonzalez, the center fielder. And so that's why he got shifted off the position. But that's the ideal guy.
Yeah, but we've seen that potential with Brenton Doyle, and I think that's what got a lot of fans excited. And what's nice is to see him as a rookie getting as much playing time as he is now, where he's out there more often than not. And they talk about Jerks and Profar probably won't play as much now. You have Grichuk back, and so you can kind of take Profar out of games, and you can leave Grichuk in there. So then Doyle can play center field. And so that outfield positioning's probably in a much better spot than it has been in the past. Just defensively, you can be pretty safe with everybody out there. But it's nice to see that potential with Doyle, to just see him move out there and make spectacular plays. And where defensively, he's there as a big leaguer. And we've seen him throw some cannons, show off his arm, make some spectacular catches where you watch him, you're like, man, I'm okay with watching him play center field for a couple of years.
Yeah. It shows. I mean, it's so evident, and it stands out in such a good way. I was working the Cincinnati series, and everything that he can do to change the game was really on display in that series. He had the 2 home run game where any mistake over the plate where he was able to get extension. I mean, he can wallop balls. He
Mhm.
has some, top shelf in-game power. And then he was also able to cover that left center gap better than anybody, at least in recent memory, that has manned center field for the Rockies for a long stretch of time. And I think that's the big thing is that, ball over his head into the gap or that ball in front of him, he has that speed to close down so much ground in the biggest outfield in baseball. And, I think it's something, whether you want to say it's been neglected for too long or they just, have had bad luck with the position, whatever. It's so important to have a premier center fielder at Coors Field because that just goes a long way in saving runs in a high scoring environment with a gigantic center field. And Doyle did that very, very well in that Cincinnati series, along with just being a monster at the plate. He offers something much different from kind of anybody else in the lineup. And I think it shows with stolen bases. He comes in and within like 3 weeks is doubling the team total by
Yeah.
himself. So there's just a whole new dimension to the offense, to the lineup that Doyle brings. And he's a rookie. He's still learning, and there's going to be good days and bad days with it. He still, has 35% strikeout percentage or whatever. So the swing and miss is still there, but what he offers has the chance to be special, and you get to see it in moments right now.
Yeah, and that's something Evan and I have talked about, and kind of that sentiment of you're okay with Doyle going out there and you're like, man, yeah, he does need to cut down on those strikeouts,
Mm-hmm.
but I still want him out there playing every day because, like we said, he's a rookie and needs that time to grow and learn and adapt. And hopefully we'll figure it out at some point. And you brought up the cargo comparison there in center field. That's exactly what happened with Carlos Gonzalez of Jim Tracy. It's like, no, he's my guy. We need his glove. Defensively, we need his glove. And because of what he's doing defensively, he's going to keep getting his offensive opportunities. And then Cargo figures it out, by like July 4th, kind of has to turn around in 2009 and becomes the player we knew him as with the Colorado Rockies. And it seems like that's kind of what they're doing with Brenton Doyle now of, okay, we trust your glove. We want your glove. You're doing great things defensively. The offense will come as we hopefully give you more opportunities and you can figure that out and cut down on those strikeouts a bit, and keep showing off that power and getting on base and utilizing that speed of his, where he's got that big combo: speed, power, defense. He's at least a 3-tool player.
Yeah, and it's the hit tool. And that's the big question with him, and specifically how much can he limit the swing and miss. It's a very high ceiling, but there could be a low floor, so to speak. He really made an adjustment in the second half of last season at Double-A Hartford. That changed everything for him. I think there was a lot of inconsistencies in his game, and I think that there was a coin flip prospect, so to speak, that he was. But his second half of the year in Double-A last year, and then when he got promoted up to Triple-A Albuquerque and just completely destroyed the PCL for 10 games or whatever he was up there with, something was different. And similar development happened with Michael Tolia, that we're kind of waiting to see the dividends get paid off for that. We're waiting for that yield a little bit. But for right now, I think that Black is showing faith in Doyle pretty quickly, at the very least, because of how much he's contributing defensively. And then I think if you just get those hot series the same way that he showed against Cincinnati, hey, that's a great ask. And then you and I had this conversation a little bit in Slack last week. It's a pretty good option for that second leadoff spot to roll over the order a little bit. Give you some high double potential or something like that. He could really change the narrative of a game or an inning with just one swing. That's the type of potency that's in his bat. So it's been awesome. There's gonna be some growing pains, but overall he's a really fun player to watch.
Yeah, and coming into today's game on Sunday against Texas, I think he already has one hit in the game, but coming into the game before he's hitting 246, has a 281 on base, so hopefully that gets better. And then a 508 slugging. He's got an OPS plus of 100. So he's getting there. He's showing that power. It's just we need him to get on base more and more so he can utilize that speed. Start dropping some bunts, doing something. We need Brenton Doyle on base because out of that 9-hole, he then makes guys like Chris Bryant, Elias Diaz, Jurickson Profar, Charlie Blackmon, makes them more valuable because there's more guys on base and they can do what we've paid them to do of drive-in runs. So it's just nice to see Brenton Doyle getting it done. And he's kind of parallel to Ezequiel Tovar. Same thing where they're getting it done defensively. Tovar is playing some good shortstop defense. He's getting more accustomed. I think he's loosened up quite a bit. I was listening to the radio broadcast because I can't watch the games. And Jack Corrigan and I think he was talking to Bud Black on the Bud Black show. And they were just talking about how Ezequiel Tovar's more or less kind of loosened himself up. That first month, he wasn't giving himself the freedom to move and trust himself. I think he was kind of tightened up a bit on defense. But then as he's gotten more comfortable and he's letting himself play defense the way he knows he can, we're seeing that pay dividends where he's making nice plays, making nice throws, and bringing out that shortstop defense we've grown so accustomed to in Colorado because we've been spoiled so much for the past decade plus of Troy Tulowitzki and Trevor Story. And so it's nice to see him kind of loosening up and playing defense to the level we know he can and what got him to this point. And it's just still kind of the same with Doyle, that offense. We're still waiting for the offense to just kind of click and become consistent.
Yeah. The book on Tovar was he's a major league shortstop right now. It was kind of the way that he was described after he kind of broke onto the scene in 2021 with Fresno. And I agree. I think he was really pressing in the first month of the season. I think that there was just, you can say it in so many different ways, but he was kind of having trouble just keeping up with the pace of the game and being just a little hesitant or caught up in trying to figure it out. And then it really did flip in May. That series against the Brewers defensively was one of the more impressive middle infield series that I've ever seen from a Rockies player. I mean, you can pull from a half dozen highlights of plays that he's making that very few guys in the big leagues make, and he's doing it pretty easily. So he was loosened up, and it's very evident. I think it started to show a little bit offensively too. You see just the game-changing potential for him. And when the Rockies kind of kicked off a really good stretch in May, to start May, I should say at least, he was their best player. And it goes to show that once he figures it out, and he's not all the way there yet, but this is the new guy that's the engine of the team. When Tovar goes, the Rockies go. And I firmly believe that that's the way that it's shaping out to be, because I mean, he had from the Arizona series through Milwaukee and the Mets, he put up a 364, 382, 727 slash line and a 183 WRC plus. So for, a 10-day stretch there where the Rockies go, or a 10-game stretch where the Rockies went like 8-2, I think it was, Tovar was the man, and he was the backbone of that team. And there's still the moments where he's pressing. He had, a pretty rough game against Cincinnati in the first game of the series, 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. Didn't start out well the next time up. I think he was 0 for 7 with 6 strikeouts, leading into just an opposite field, inside out home run. And so he, there's still the moments, and Black mentioned he's a 21-year-old just kind of trying to stay afloat at times. And that's fair. That's the point that he's at right now. But I think that 10-game stretch to kick off the month really showed what the hype is for, and also what it can mean when Tovar, finally does start clicking and start feeling like a confident big leaguer, because that's the new engine of the Rockies when he starts going.
Yeah, and it's the thing offensively is we've seen those moments, those little bits and spurts of it. We're like, yes, that's what the Tovar that we want. That's the one that we can expect, where he can get on base, use some speed, show some power, and be that another spark plug there in that lineup. And I think a big part of it, we're seeing with Doyle as well, is these rookies just learning the strike zone and learning, I guess the strike zone, just learning how to cut down on the strikeouts, or at least normalize them a little bit, where you're not getting the huge gap of 40 some odd strikeouts to 6 walks. So it's figuring out the plate approach, because we've seen Tovar, he'll strike out 3 pitches, 1, 2, 3, but then he'll throw out those at bats where he sees 12, 13 pitches, and then he strikes out or does manage to draw a walk or something. And so we see those little glimpses of what they can do at the plate. And if Tovar can figure that out, once he can click and really figure out his approach at the plate and how opposing pitchers are throwing him, because he's an aggressive hitter. He's going up there swinging. And if he can figure out when to do that, when to utilize that aggression to his benefit, I think we'll then see him really start to take off offensively to catch up to the defense he's already got.
It's very interesting kind of having these two in the same conversation, because there's a comparable kind of young guy, high strikeouts, figuring it out narrative with both, but they get there in very different ways. The swing decisions have always been the big thing when it comes to Ezequiel Tovar's plate approach, and the questions that he needs to answer, where it's not so much chasing or swinging or whiffing necessarily. It's putting bad balls in play or going after pitches outside of the strike zone consistently, which can lead to some of those long at bats that he's able to win, or it can lead into a whole lot of nothing in that bat, because you're going after that slider off the plate, you're getting yourself out, so to speak. When it comes to Doyle, the whiff is the bigger concern, the actual swing and miss within the zone. So they get there in different ways of having to refine and just really pick and choose your battles on when to attack and when to unleash that aggression. But that's okay. I mean, that's the whole point of letting these guys play right now, is so they can start figuring out in major league experience. And a lot of the hair pulling moments for Rockies fans this year has been why are they not in there to gain these important at bats for their development, so that way they can start refining those plate approaches and understand what it takes to be successful consistently. With Doyle and Tovar, they're getting those opportunities, and I think with Tovar as a whole for the entire season, that's always been the plan. They're not the only ones, is where we can leave it if we need to, but the Rockies are honestly a better team right now, playing their younger players, and it's a healthier thing for their organization moving forward. The more of these younger guys they can get in. It's been good in May, but it needs to keep on continuing that direction and garnering more and more of that experience, because that's going to be beneficial for the organization down the road.
Yeah, because then if these guys aren't panning out or they just can't figure it out, you can cut bait and reassess and move other guys up. So it's just a free-flowing, nice your pipes aren't clogged.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, you brought up the Drano.
Yeah, it's just, man, I'll say it right now. You got to see what you have now in Tolia and Montero, and Coco Montez is another conversation that needs to be had right now. It's not just Doyle and Tovar that need to be gaining this important experience, and also providing a fresher, newer faced product that is more captivating to fans and the clubhouse. So they're not the only ones, but the fact that we're kind of seeing this right now and getting to watch the peaks and valleys, so to speak, with their development, that's a good sign at the very least.
Yeah, it's good stuff. If they're still going to be terrible, we'd at least want to watch these young guys growing and getting that experience more than watching Harold Castro go 0 for 4 again, that type of thing.
100%. And I'll throw CJ Crone into that conversation, to be honest.
Yeah. We've had our fun with them, but okay, let's start turning the things over. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over. Want some change.
It's one thing, it goes back to the starting rotation. If you don't have any other options, okay, like you got to go with the guy, and that's just what it is, because there's nothing else on that. But when you have the position backfilled with guys waiting for their opportunities. Man, if you're going to be 8 games under 500 with them, you can be 8 games under 500 without them too. Start giving, the overflow those opportunities to see what they can do, because you might be surprised.
Yeah, because and we're seeing it around baseball. Teams are a little bit more, I think, willing to eat some contracts, cut bait with the veteran that has been good for them in the past. Cut bait so then younger guys can play. They can get new, fresh faces in there. Saw with Aaron Hicks with New York. Arizona cut bait with Madison Bumgarner. We're seeing a lot of that stuff happen.
Hosmer,
yeah, Eric Hosmer got dumped by the Cubs. So in favor of younger players or newer, fresh players that are playing better, and for those teams to reassess instead of just throwing out, they're willing to eat those contracts, which it's bad for those guys, but they're still getting paid. So
yeah. Hey, the guaranteed contracts in baseball are real, and so just because you pay them doesn't mean you have to play them. And we're in the final year of some deals too, so it'll be interesting because there is some trade value that's starting to feel like a possibility for a couple of guys that maybe they would have been feeling more applicable for the DFA conversation. Will they trade them when the time comes too? Because now, not only are you refusing to, acknowledge that you have house money, you're not willing to do anything about it. If you hold on to a Grichuk, a Diaz, we'll see about Crone, but a few guys where it's like, okay, if you can turn around and flip a Profar, a Grichuk, a Diaz, and get anything to help shoot for the future, you get active at the deadline and you move them, so that way you're able to create younger opportunities. And who knows, maybe you got a good lottery ticket in the batch. So yeah, that's going to be a whole other thing when it comes to the trade deadline in July, because Rockies and trade deadlines are not exactly the best times.
Yeah, because we don't have any superstars to trade at the moment. So, well.
Yeah, I don't know. Without bad mouthing, there's an opportunity this year for the Rockies to maybe flip a couple of pieces, and I think it will be more beneficial for the direction of the franchise. But we'll see what happens.
If their goal is 2024, there's a lot to do, and they have the opportunity to do it. So, Brenton Doyle and Ezequiel Tovar are just kind of that first slow wave of guys coming in. Hopefully, we see more as the season goes on and into next year.
Yep, the new generation R.
Yes.
No.
Bring back Dan O'Dowd.
I'm sure he's around in some way, shape, or form.
He's tanning somewhere. Talking about stuff on MLB Network.
Getting all oranged up.
Quick story before we end. I went to the winter meetings in 2018 when they were in Las Vegas, and I passed Dan O'Dowd on an escalator. I walked by him as I was headed to an escalator. And I was like, "Hey, Dan, how's it going?" He's like, "Oh, hey, good." And he kept going. And that was the orangest human being I have ever seen. And you can see where the tanning goggles are. And so it's just white around his eyes and then just super orange, like Donald Trump orange.
Yeah. I could see it flaking off of him with just how caked on it would be. It's like secondhand smoke, secondhand spray tan.
It was really funny. Man, dude spends a lot of time in the tanning bed where he's just laying on the bronzer on his face or something.
Yeah, I think so. It's like aftershave for him. Taking it.
Oh, Dan O'Dowd. But that's going to do it here for this edition of Affected by Altitude. As always, we thank you for joining with us and putting up with our shenanigans. And we always appreciate your thoughts and feedback. Kenneth, where can the folks find you?
I am on Twitter at KDub1988. And then I'm going to be at Purple Row every Monday with my rock piles and the Pebble Report.
Awesome. And then you can find me over at sideline_crowd. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RockyMTN Rooftop. And we're not as consistent. We'll try to post lineups and stuff. But as always, Evan and I get busy, so sometimes social media doesn't come through, but we try our best. Also, you can always go find our Spreadshirt shop, rocky-mountain-rooftop.myspreadshop.com. You can find the sweet That's Baseball Bud Black silhouette t-shirt we've got on there. there's still plenty available for people to buy. And that means you too, Kenneth. Go buy one.
Do it. Count me in.
They're pretty sweet. Evan was at a minor league game and he wore it behind home plate. So
Nice.
free advertising.
Love it.
Yeah, they're pretty sweet shirts. You can get one for like $20. Pretty nice. Get one on a mug, hoodie, all that stuff. And it goes towards supporting the podcast so we can keep doing this and try and better the show more and more and keep doing this. But as always, appreciate you joining, Kenneth. Always a pleasure. We'll have you back here again soon here with Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Until next time, we'll see you. Farewell. This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.